the 11th Pan-African Conference on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation, Communique. We, representatives of civil society organizations, government bodies, intergovernmental organizations, individual researchers, media entities, and parliamentarians from several countries across the continent, meeting in Accra, Ghana, during the 11th Pan-African Conference on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation from the 22nd of November to the 24th of November 2023. Having deliberated on the theme, Making Global Tax Governance Work for Africa, under the hosting of the Republic of Ghana, represented by His Excellency Ken Ofori-Atta, Minister of Finance, during the opening session. Cognizant of the fact that illicit financial flows pose an unprecedented threat to Africa's economic growth and development trajectory by exacerbating pre-existing vulnerabilities and worsening dependence on external financial resources, stressing the critical importance of good governance for African countries as a critical source of economic diversification, value addition, structural transformation, and economic growth, having witnessed the historic vote on the resolution tabled by the Africa Group at the United Nations on the promotion of inclusive tax cooperation at the United Nations towards a more inclusive, equitable, and fair international tax system, further lending our support to the efforts of the African Group on the promotion of inclusive and effective tax cooperation at the United Nations for a fair, transparent, and more equitable tax system, having examined the major structural challenges hampering Africa's ability to stem illicit financial flows and proposed various ways of overcoming them, recognizing that the fight against IFFs is crucial to drive economic transformation, inclusive growth, and sustainable development, mindful of the impact of the global crisis on African capacities to access sustainable financial resources with the correlative effect on capital accumulation, productivity, social outcomes with the increase of poverty and inequalities, and being aware of the need for strategic action to reverse the current trends, aware of the fact that the sources of IFFs are from within our continent and the fundamental responsibility for eliminating the sources rests with the governments of African states, recognizing that the sustainability of initiatives for regional integration, such as the AFCFTA, calls for a strong commitment to accelerate Africa's productive transformation with the view to building a resilient regional value chains for our continental and global productive and competitive economy to fulfill the vision and aspirations of the African Union's Agenda 2063, recalling that commercial activities are by far the largest contributor to IFFs, followed by organized crime than public sector activities, acknowledging that Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development offer a unique opportunity for Africa to redesign and implement a coherent and effective development pathway that strengthens and sustains economic growth through sustainable industrialization and leads to a socially inclusive society that works for the well-being of all its people through appropriate efforts to fight against poverty and inequalities and offering opportunities of upward mobility to all, including women and young people. We hereby affirm that the Pan-African Conference on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation should continue to be organized annually under the leadership of the African Union Commission, Tax Justice Network Africa, and the Africa Tax Administration Forum, and other Pan-African institutions as the premier space for collective convergence of actors to provide a platform to discuss taxation issues in Africa and track progress that is being made in this area. Reiterate the call for urgent and comprehensive reforms of the global financial, tax, and debt architectures for effective fight against IFFs. Recognize the historical exclusion of African countries in global tax discussions and advocate for a more participatory and equitable global tax system. We also commend the leadership at the Africa Group at the UN in supporting efforts around the reforms of the global financial architecture. Support the consistent efforts by the Africa Group at the UN in championing the start of negotiations at the United Nations towards a UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation as a meaningful step toward achieving these transformative objectives. emphasized that domestic measures are indispensable, but are currently largely insufficient when implemented alone, therefore stressed the importance of regional, continental, and international collaboration to instigate structural and governance challenges within the global financial and economic structure. Underscore that fostering solidarity among nations and tax justice movements in the Global South is key to achieving global coalitions on issues around IFFs and taxation. This solidarity will reinforce the political momentum needed to reform the inequitable global financial architecture, take decisive steps towards forging a new consensus among Southern nations to effectively tackle IFFs through a comprehensive reform of the global financial architecture and the international tax system. Acknowledge the nexus between debt, pandemics, climate change, conflicts, and development, and reaffirm our commitment to combating IFFs as a contribution to addressing these pressing issues, and recognize that in the face of these challenges, it is vital to prioritize and implement practical recommendations at national, regional, continental, and global levels. Recognize the impact of climate change on our continent, underscore the critical importance of effective climate financing to achieve Africa's transition to growth, harnessing the continent's huge energy potential. We acknowledge the interconnectedness of tax justice, climate justice, with a central focus on domestic resource mobilization for climate adaptation and resilience. Encourage stronger civic participation in global negotiations on tax IFFs and the reform of the global financial architecture through solidarity and collaboration among Pan-African stakeholders, including civil society, government bodies, intergovernmental organizations, researchers, media, entities, and parliamentarians from diverse countries across the continent, with a view to making global tax governance work for Africa. Affirm that tackling IFFs is a key development priority and sovereign imperative for promoting economic independence and sovereignty over our economic destinies. We encourage African countries to continue taking decisive actions against IFFs and ensuring that the recovered resources are directed to productive investments to achieve inclusive growth and sustainable development that specifically uplifts the most marginalized, with a dedicated focus on women and youth. As the AUC, ATAF, and TJNA, we commit to continue supporting African countries and voicing their positions in the global tax debate. Further, we commit to undertaking work to continue implementation of the Anti-IFF Policy Tracker, continue implementing the recommendations of the Specialized Technical Committee on IFFs, look at tax incentives in Africa, and provide members with updates on the developments in the international tax rulemaking. Express our appreciation to the government of the Republic of Ghana for successfully hosting the 11th Pan-African Conference on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation. Commit to support the implementation of the action points in this communique, adopted on this 24th day of November 2023 in Accra, Ghana.